for joining us on this webinar for Cloudways. I'm here with Bryce Adams, the founder of Metorik.com. And as you see, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping because I'm on my own in this webinar. Usually my friends Peter Neri and Lee Matthew Jackson would be with me. They both can't join us, but Bryce will make up for them because he's an amazing guest. Yeah, I have no doubt about that because we've spoken a couple of times in the past and we always had fun conversations. So for everybody who's watching this, leave your questions in the comments, no matter whether you're watching live or in the replay. Shoot your questions at us. We'll make sure that we get back to you in the comments whenever we can. Bryce, the topic today is WooCommerce reporting and how to make data-driven decisions in WooCommerce to increase sales, increase conversion rates. But before we dive into this, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Metorik is?
For sure. So Metorik is it's kind of like, I call it like a co-pilot for e-commerce stores. But yeah, that basically means we try to be that little helper that every e-commerce store really needs, big or small. And we do that through a number of features and products. But basically at its core, it's a reporting tool. And then on top of that, it goes a bit deeper by actually giving you a lot of like powerful tools for segmenting orders, customers, and a lot of data like that. And then takes it a bit further by letting you email and send like automated emails and now actually doing broadcasts, so sending out like bulk emails to a bunch of segmented customers. So yeah, we kind of look at it as a co-pilot, but in the end of the day, the easiest way to describe it is reporting, email automation, that kind of thing.
You've come a long way with that.
Yeah, well, it's funny looking at the product and thinking like when I first started it back in 2016, it was literally just like a few reports and totals, and it made it look really nice. And I think that was what at the time people wanted, or at least it was already a big step up from the built-in tools in WooCommerce. And we'll talk about that a bit. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it started. But it's funny looking at like, I sometimes I would look at an old screenshot or see an old video and documentation. I think for a lot of other products, it's normally like that. You're going through like familiar, an old doc and you're updating it. Yeah, and you're just like, did the app used to look like that? And it's been a bit like that. So it has changed a lot and come a long way. And a lot of that has just been through like feedback, because I don't run an e-commerce store. I've run some over the years and even tried to like kind of learn more, like put myself in the shoes of a store owner. But ultimately, like the stores and the people using the product know what we need to build much better than me. So a lot of the decisions that I make are based on just feedback. And that's kind of how we got from where we were to where we are now.
Yeah, and it's exciting. We had an off-camera conversation before we hit record about the need for additional reporting in WooCommerce, because there are some basic reports already. And in the early stages, you face feedback like nobody's going to use that, even from the Woo team. Like we do have reports. Yeah. Why are you building this?
Elaborate. That was the reaction from a lot of people.
Can you elaborate a little bit on why there's additional reporting needed if you're serious about WooCommerce?
Yeah, I just think that, and a lot of the original idea for Metorik years and years ago came out of me just trying to run a store. And I was running this monthly candy subscription from Thailand when I was living at the time, and basically sending out a box of different Thai sweets every month. And it was fun, but I was running this shop and I was not doing many orders. I think the highest we got up to was like 30 or 40 orders in a month, which I was very happy about, but it wasn't, thousands and tens of thousands. Even then though, I kept finding these little things that I needed to do and I couldn't do with WooCommerce, and it was frustrating me. Things like exporting a certain group of customers or addresses, other things just like wanting to look at my numbers and see a really beautiful UI. And it's a stupid thing, but it's like, it's also, as a business owner, you need those things to motivate you. And I wanted to see like the sales in a big number, like on a dashboard. And I had all these things that I kind of wanted, but it didn't really have in WooCommerce. And that's kind of what spurred it for me originally, just thinking back then and wanting to, solve that problem for myself. But then eventually when I kind of quit my job, I was working at Automatic and decided, I'm going to quit and build this product. I didn't really know what to build, but I did know that when I was running a shop, I had that need. And I knew just from my friends that were running shops that it was a pretty common need. Like, we need to know our best-selling products and we need to do this, and things that you could do inside of WooCommerce. But at the time, we're either really slow or also just like not enjoyable to do. It's like, yeah, you could get that number, but much like you can, you can make a fresh juice by like squeezing, the fruit by hand with one of those old like ones that, it's like pointy, or you could use a blender or a juicer. Like, and I just wanted to make a better tool or a better way to do this. And that's kind of what started it.
Yeah, that is a very important point, because as business owners, we need to focus on the efficiency of things, and we need to get to where we need to go fast and reliably. And from my experience, I've never run a big WooCommerce shop myself either, but there are reports, but they are so painful to use. I mean, even with the latest WooCommerce updates, it's not even really, I want to say, fast in the back end. You still have to wait from time to time. So why is reporting so important when you're driving a WooCommerce store, and what are some of the most important metrics that we as WooCommerce users should look into?
Well, I think one thing that I will say on that note, and it's something that's only something I've realized in the last year or so, just because not a year, but I was maybe around a year ago actually that we started. I measure, like most people around the world, life events and business events by lockdowns, and I'm just like thinking about, I was in lockdown. It was that lockdown, and so that's how I kind of remember. But back then, a year ago, we started building an integration with Shopify, and Shopify's out of the box reports and tools are very good, and it's fast because Shopify is one single kind of product or platform for all their customers. So, in doing that, I actually for a long time hesitated to build an integration with Shopify because I thought it had everything that customers would want, but our customers, some of them who had gone from Woo to Shopify, and some that were just on Shopify from the start, but saw our product and reached out to us, told us, no, like Shopify's reports are not enough for us. And so I think it's kind of like a moving target for Woo and Shopify or any e-commerce platform in building reports, because what is the right solution on that day? It might be, but a few months later it changes. But plugins and software like that, especially ones that are used by millions of people, it's harder to make those big changes, right? While I guess our advantage is that we can just constantly iterate on a continuous basis. So it makes it a bit easier to stay on top of like the different trends, but also to keep iterating and improving the product as needed. So it's a hard one. And I think the internal tools inside of Woo and Shopify need to be better. And I think that will continue to get better, but it's also a very specific problem, right? And when you're building like everything to do with an e-commerce store, from the checkout experience to the cart to everything, like there's so much involved besides the reporting. So I think it's a tough problem, but one that we're happy to kind of solve on the side. Okay, so that was like a long-winded answer. But back to, I guess, your original point, like what metrics are most important? It's a good question. And there's no one answer fits all. The biggest ones that I guess doesn't matter what you're selling, who your customers are, anything, the type of product. These are the numbers I think that are metrics that are important to everyone. Things like LTV, lifetime value. So just looking at a customer and knowing what is the total they've spent with you over their lifetime, and then looking at that across all your customers and different cohorts of customers, so you can understand how LTV measures across customers in different regions, customers who have bought different products. It's such an important number because it kind of it makes like, other questions like how much should you spend on acquiring new customers? How much should you spend on like other costs are dependent on the revenue. So once you can calculate your average LTV, everything just becomes a bit easier. Other numbers that kind of come to mind, like average order value, average order items, again, just having a good understanding of what the average order is or what the average customer is goes a long way. And all those numbers are like very connected. So if you can like increase one, it's normally going to influence the others. But it's important that I guess you're focusing on those metrics and not some very like auxiliary non-significant number.
Yeah, and I've just put up a banner with some fancy acronyms because
Awesome.
It looks cool. You're so right with this though, because everything boils down to how much you earn from having a single customer in the end. And what I love is, let's take average order value, for example. Say your cost of acquisition for a new customer is $25 and your average order value is only 20. You are losing money, obviously. But there are two ways to fix this problem. One is you bring down the cost of acquisition by improving your ad campaigns or doing remarketing or whatever. The other thing is increasing average order value, which is what many store owners don't think about. And why not just add another bump offer to your product? Why not add another upsell in the cart or something like that to bring that up?
Exactly. No, it's such a good point. And I think it's just, again, one of those things where it doesn't seem obvious on the surface, but it's when you start to look at the metrics and you see like the difference that can be made. Like you could example segment customers in Metorik by like, again, a lot of the advice I'm giving definitely is not dependent on using Metorik. It's my product and I love it and I think it's really good at this, but you might not run Ecommerce, or you might be on a different platform we don't support, or it might be cost prohibitive. That's okay. A lot of tools will still let you do this, especially if you can export the data. But yeah, looking at like orders that have a certain product, like an upsell product, comparing those orders to ones that don't, immediately you can see those differences in the numbers, like the average order value is going to be higher. And then I think you can go a bit further and look at the customers who are actually buying that upsell product. And then do they end up making a second order and third order? And a lot of the times what we see is yes, because if you give them a better experience on that first order, they're probably going to come back for a second. But even if they don't, just increasing that average order value on the first order is going to help your bottom line, because if you're only going to get one order from that customer, you may as well make it as big as possible, right?
So true. And I'm using this principle right now in one of my funnels. I'm selling a book for $4.99 to pre-qualify customers that are coming in, because I'm sick of those freebie seekers who just sign up for an email list. And then on that funnel, I have a $35 upsell and I have a $47 upsell. So even though I trigger people with a $4.99 book and the book is great and all of that, I can spend more than $4.99 to acquire a customer because of those upsells. And I think that is something that would give many shop owners a competitive advantage in just knowing that you can do this if you have the data and if you can adjust the campaigns that you're running with the data. But
if you do those decisions without the data, you may as well, or at least without looking at that data after, you may as well just burn money, because that's all it is. Right?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so true. I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that product reporting, because for many WooCommerce owners, they'll also have inventory that they have to manage. They have to do shipping and stuff like that. What are some of the metrics when it comes to product reporting that you find your customers use the most?
So with like product reporting, I think again, it depends on the business, especially like, is it digital product? Oh, sorry. My
audio went off.
No, it's playing a test for me.
That's cool.
Sure. Thanks, StreamYard. Where were we? Okay, so when it comes to like product reporting, I think it depends on the business, but it's probably important to focus, at least for most stores, on like what are the best selling products, of course, but also like more than that, what are your worst selling products? A lot of the times, like as businesses, we're promoting all of our products equally, or at least giving them all a bit of attention. But sometimes it's just not worth it, or like there's costs involved with. If you're a physical business, it's normally costs involved with every different SKU you have. It's another SKU to manage in terms of stock, in terms of fulfillment and where they are in the warehouse and everything like that. So kind of focusing on what are your worst selling products and eliminating them or trying to increase the sales for it, that's another option, is a really good idea for most businesses. Another thing that I really tend to recommend is to monitor like the profit margin on every product, because again, what's the point of selling your best seller if it doesn't make you any money? There's no point. So
unless you're feeling good in saying that you sell 10,000 items per day, but then if you lose 10 grand every day.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to not just look at one number, but look at the whole picture and try to understand how one influences the other. So if you just looked at products by top sellers, by the number or the revenue, a product might appear to be an incredible kind of lever for your business that you want to invest more in, but it's might not be the case if it's not profitable, or if you're having other bad things come out of that product, like customers don't order off again. So you could also look at kind of on a bigger picture, instead of looking at the individual product sales on their own, maybe look at customers that bought a certain product. And like one thing that we do in Metorik, and I think is a pretty cool thing to segment on, regardless of where you do your segmenting, customers' first purchase product. So actually saying, if a customer buys like this t-shirt as their first product, looking at the stats for them and saying, well, what's the average customer of those customers? So if you have 1,000 customers that first ordered a certain product, how many orders did those customers end up making over their lifetime with you? What was the average number of orders? Because if they only made one on average, or like a low, like 1.1, that to me is alarming and makes me think, well, maybe there's something wrong with that product, or we need to focus on the fulfillment side of it, and it's getting, damaged in shipment or anything like that. But yeah, it's all about really like taking these individual metrics, but then trying to look a little bit from a higher level and see how they all intertwine. And
yeah, so essentially it's a case by case decision based on the business model, how you bring in the customers. But you made some really counterintuitive point there by looking at the worst performing products. That would have definitely not been on my radar. I would be somebody.
It's not something that you normally like do, but I think you can look at things, the good numbers, the ones that make you feel good, or you can look at the numbers that will actually help move your bottom line. And like I'm guilty of this as well, where I avoid looking at the things that don't make me feel good. But if you want to improve the business, you need to fix those holes. And a lot of times you can make, I think just general business advice, you can make a lot bigger impact by fixing the issues rather than necessarily just trying to make things better that are already good, that are already working, but rather actually like find those problems and fix them.
Yeah, that's again, coming back to our off-camera conversation, that is what people don't want to do. They don't want to invest the time to do stuff that sucks, even though that's the biggest bringer of results usually. We've talked about a lot of analyzing data and a lot of making data-driven decisions. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when it comes to doing these decisions? Because there is a lot of room for interpretation when you're looking at product data, when you're looking at sales data. And I think it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole, to lose yourself and to recognize patterns that aren't really there. So what are some of the tips for that?
That's one of my tips for sure. Just not focusing too much on like, the top line numbers, and actually or like these numbers that aren't that important. Like you can't look at one or the other. It's not binary. It's definitely, you have to be all encompassing. So you need to look at these important numbers like your revenue, but then compare that to the profit and look at the margin and look at that over time. The other big mistake I see people make is that they make decisions based off data, but they don't follow up on them. And again, it's just no point. You're just crossing your fingers otherwise. So I think it's important to actually look at that and see, all right, well, we had this assumption based on the data that we should focus more on this product. This product we saw has a good retention rate. But then if you're not following up and actually checking that was true, that hypothesis is actually true in reality, what's the point? And that's something that people tend to make a mistake with. Another one as well is like not segmenting and not looking at the data in cohorts and things like that. Because if you run a store that has 2,000 new customers a month, they're 2,000 very different customers most of the time. Unless you sell one single product, they're normally different types of customers. Some might have a bigger wallet that want to spend more. Some might not. Some might be businesses. Some might be consumers. Different regions. So it's important to kind of like not just look at these overall numbers, but rather focus on how the individual ones all come together for different cohorts. Again, though, you can go too deep and look too much into one tiny cohort and stuff. So you don't want to get focused and bogged down on these like tiny details. I just think it's a balancing act. So too much of one or the other, it's just not good. A little bit of both, you're going to get better results.
That is so good. How much data do we need? Like, say, for example, you've just said 2,000 customers a month. That's, I would assume, a really solid amount of data that you are collecting over 30 days. But is like 50 customers enough, 50 orders enough to make a solid decision? Or is that just too little of a data set to decide anything?
I mean, really? your business is what it is, right? Like, and for me, when I was starting off Metorik and we only had 50 customers, I still, looked at those customers in a lot of detail, spoke to all of them. I think what you just do if you have less data or less customers is you need to work a little bit harder to extract. And again, maybe I'm going back to the same metaphor with the juicing. But yeah, you need to work a little bit harder to like, you know, get the juice out of the fruit. And it's a bit like that when you don't have as much data. It's still there. And maybe the other advice I'd give there is to constantly reevaluate it. Like the actions that worked when you had 50 customers are not going to always necessarily work when you've got 500 or 5,000 customers. So it's that constantly shifting like change of how you actually act on the data, depending on how much of it you have.
Yeah, that is, I think, a key point that you're bringing on right here. I mean, the data is only so good, and talking to your customers is one thing that maybe gets even deeper than a good reporting tool like Metorik. It's like the information you get from your individual customers, especially if you're starting out and you have 50 customers, you can talk to 50 people. You can't talk to 2,000. That would just take up 3 hours every day.
Right. No, but it's also this big advantage, right? Because like when you do have not that many customers, you are able to have those conversations and find these things that you wouldn't normally. I think even for me, I'm guilty of that, where like now that we're on a couple thousand customers, I just can't speak to everyone. It's not possible. I don't have the time or resources. But you know, when I was 50 or 100 customers, or even a few hundred, I did end up speaking to most customers and having these conversations where I actually found out a lot that I needed to improve, or it gave me a lot of ideas. So sometimes the bigger you get, the kind of more abstracted you are away from like your end customers, which can be good because you can make some decisions that aren't influenced by one or two people. But it also means you miss some details because, there's a lot of insights that can be had just from having a conversation with a couple customers, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. How do we then validate the decisions that we make? So say we have a hypothesis that product A will sell better than product B in the future. We followed up on that, and we maybe even set up the two different promotion campaigns so that we drive traffic to those products. How do we collect enough data to make a decision that is actually based on data rather than gut feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And that's kind of what it is, like where there is a lot of gut feeling. I think the important thing is really to iterate. And by that, I mean, you know, come back to the numbers on a continuous basis. One way to do that, like we do something called digest, where the reports that optionally send every day, week, month. But you can, if you have, you know, the resources, build a dashboard, or like you could use Google Data Studio. It's another option. Build a way to kind of feed in all the numbers that matter to you, and constantly like look at them and reevaluate them daily, weekly, because otherwise, you know, you're going to be guessing, and it's just what it always comes down to. Be sure and be more confident in the decisions you make, so you can, like, I think, take an action based on numbers, iterate, like look at the result and then iterate. That's just what it ultimately comes down to. And I think regardless of any of the business you're in, that's probably good advice, or at least it's worked for me, is to constantly be reevaluating all the decisions you've made, and then looking at the decisions you do make and how they perform, evaluate again. It's just like this constant loop.
Yeah. How much time do you give yourself usually for those evaluation processes? For example, I'm running the Virtual Summit Mastery podcast to build more authority in the summit space, and I'm giving myself 6 months before I look at any results, because with the podcast, it takes time to get it off the ground. The same is for an accompanying SEO campaign with all the transcripts and stuff. When it comes to e-commerce, it's an entirely different game, I feel, though, because you can drive a lot of traffic with paid traffic, with influencer campaigns and so on. Is 50 sales for a product a good baseline? Is 100 sales for a product a good baseline? Does that all depend on the size of the store? Like,
I think it depends, and I think it depends on the product, the customer base, like in your case, right, where you were giving the example of a podcast, like the format of the content that varies as well. Like, right, as an e-commerce business or any kind of business, you might say, well, we want to focus more on marketing, so we're going to make blog posts, more content, and you know, the results that you can see from a blog post versus a podcast versus video content, they all kind of have a different time it takes to get to the point of, like, you can make a decision based off it. I think with anything, definitely like a couple months is good, because it gives you enough time to avoid any seasonal variance. Well, not even enough time, but it's enough time to maybe, because sometimes there's like a holiday one week, or one country is going through, especially now with COVID, like one country is going through something different, like a lockdown. So if you had this whole like marketing campaign, but it was based off a certain region, and just suddenly like that region goes into a lockdown or has high case numbers and things like that, it can throw off all your calculations. So I definitely say at least a couple months, maybe more depending on the business. We have some customers that are purely seasonal around like Christmas and stuff like that, Christmas trees and holiday presents, things like that. For them, sometimes they're waiting a year to see the results.
Wow.
But that's the nature of the
I will
business,
go
right?
crazy.
I know.
I couldn't stand that. Like a year to validate
but
my
that makes it
ideas.
so much more important, right? Like to look at
Yeah.
every number, because you need as much as you can, because you've got to make decisions for 9 months ahead in the future.
Wow. It is. And I think it's the same for every big promotion that's coming up. When I was running an e-commerce store selling wooden watches, Father's Day in the US would be a big one. Black Friday, of course, Christmas, of course. Any special holiday, really, you could do like these themed watches, Halloween watches and stuff like that. I certainly didn't look at the reports though.
No, but it's again, like it's hard because a lot of it's guessing, and a lot of it is just kind of like, trying to find these trends, and they're there. I think it's just good to try to leverage software like ours or any of the options built-in reports to help you, because if you're just calculating, it's also like, how long does it take you to figure out those numbers? And if it takes you every time like an hour to calculate a certain metric, you're not going to calculate it. Like you can't do it consistently. You're going to do it once or twice, but not every week or not every month. So it's probably important to focus on the numbers that matter, but then find a very consistent, fast way, ideally even automatic way, to get that number on a consistent basis. Otherwise, it's going to become a burden and you're not going to do it.
Yeah,
and,
100%.
I'm guilty of that as well.
100%. I've just built a Google Data Studio dashboard for my funnel because it's not based on WooCommerce or Shopify, and set up some Zaps for that in Zapier. And you're totally right.
If you hadn't done that, if you were manually collecting the numbers every time, right?
No chance I would do it. Not a snowball's chance in hell I would do that. Definitely not. Now, we're already almost 30 minutes in, and we've covered a lot of theory so far on how to understand reporting. I would love for you to give us some examples of what to actually do with that, because you've mentioned that Metorik now also does email blasts and segmenting and follow-up and abandoned cart recovery and stuff like that. Can you tell us some of those most popular use cases that Metorik has for implementing the data?
Oh, 100%. I think, email is always just, with e-commerce, it's the best lever you have. It works so well. It's normally how you reach those customers in the first place. So leveraging it will help. Definitely in a more automated way, because manually sending out email and it's hard to keep that consistency for customers. So if you can automate as much as possible, follow-up emails, lost customer emails, things like that, abandoned cart emails, and that also allows you the chance to automate the discounts or like the offerings that you do have, because if you're manually sending an email every month or every few weeks to the same kind of cohort, it can be really hard to keep that consistency, and that can result in a worse customer experience, in my opinion. So I think that's important. Another lever that we see people use a lot, which just works really well, is segmenting, and then maybe exporting that segment and then putting it into like Facebook or Google ads for retargeting. That's again, another way that is a little less direct than email, but in some ways can have even better results, because it's a more natural, like organic experience for the end customers to see an ad and then be reminded that they haven't bought from you in a while. So definitely stuff like that. Another kind of action that I think people don't do enough is looking at the data, making a decision based off it, like, we should focus more on this product, but then actually actioning it and saying, well, like, how do we do that? Maybe we need to make new landing pages or make more content. And so I think you need to kind of always go that step further once you have the insight and then action it. It's not always as simple as send an email, but a lot of times it is. Sometimes it's it's taking that data and then just making a change to how you market your product already. Like you might do, for example, a lot of in-person trade shows, not so much anymore, but definitely we're going to go back to that as vaccines happen, right? And like, you know, what products do you bring to the trade shows, and what products are the ones that you like lead with? Sometimes just looking at the data, making decisions based off that, then what you do in real life already, like in physical situations, can be a really good use of the data. But ultimately, like, we tend to push email just because it's a very low cost, low effort action that does result in, I think, a really good experience for everyone, as long as you're not abusing that privilege of emailing your customers and getting consent and being kind of thoughtful, and of course making unsubscribing easy. You can still like do that and communicate with the customers that want to hear from you. But also like constantly, again, iterating and not just sending an email, an automatic email, and just leaving it forever. Look at it every few months. Like I do something similar with my business where I like reevaluate a lot of the things I have working automatically on an every few month basis. And that, you know, looking at that data and reevaluating is a kind of automatic thing. I have like an automatic reminder in my productivity tool of choice to remind me to automatically do something. So it's like using software and using tools like Metorik and other ones to do these automatic actions, but then having that human touch to it and that human intervention every so often.
Yeah, I love this. I'm doing the exact same. I'm following the VTO, Vision Traction Organizer, from what's the process called? EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's in 90-day blocks, essentially. So for 90 days, I'll set one goal that I want to achieve in the business. And then this also helps avoiding shiny object syndrome, which I'm a big sucker for, I'll be honest.
We all are.
Whenever I see something shiny, I'm jumping at it. And with that time frame that I'm giving myself, that I know I just need to focus on, that I don't need to build the next funnel, I don't need to build the next marketing campaign, just iterate on what I already do, trying to win back the customers, engage with the subscribers I already have, turning those into customers, winning back the customers that have bought from me once to get them to buy from me again, with the help of tools
much
and
easier.
reporting.
Yeah, much easier than new customer. New customer acquisition is the hardest, and I think it's definitely acknowledged by most industries, especially e-commerce, to be like the biggest pain point, because it costs money, and there's only so much we have as businesses to invest into these funnels, and so if you can look at the data you have and interact with the existing customers, whether they're recent or 6 months ago. You don't want to talk to customers from too long ago, because there is that point where you become more of a burden and do more damage, more harm than good, right? But if you're like constantly like looking at customers that have churned and trying to ask yourself why and what can I do to fix that, whether it's making a decision to change something on your website, or actually like get in touch with those customers and try to win them back directly. As long as you keep moving and keep having those actions, and don't just leave it all to chance, it's normally going to be a lot better than that.
100%. What are some of the most common timeframes you would follow up with past customers on?
I think you want to keep it. You don't want to be too frequent. Like if you message someone a month later, like it can be a bit frustrating. But again, it depends on the product. We have a lot of customers that do products in like the toiletries space or health space, and like if you're selling a deodorant, you probably do want to follow up with them like a month and a half later if they're not on a subscription, because like how long your product lasts, and you also know if your product is like, some products like coffee, it's easy to switch between, but like a deodorant or a health product, like you typically, if you enjoy the product, you want to stick with it. So if they haven't ordered after a month and a half, but the product only lasts a month, it can make you question why. What did we do wrong? What do we need to do better? Is the price the problem? And like that's a good kind of way to look at it. Like, what is your product? How often should they be reordering, or how often should they come back? If it's like a product like homewares or something where it's more like spur of the moment, like some furniture, maybe not as often. Maybe after 3 months, offer them something, an incentive to come back. And the key to doing this with incentives, at least, is making it a unique coupon code. This is just a no-brainer, but it's something that a lot of tools overlook, and just a lot of business overlook, because they don't realize what's possible. First reaction, if you want to email a bunch of customers and give them 20% off, make a 20% off coupon code, send them an email with it. Yeah, as a customer, I've been on the receiving end of that a lot, and it doesn't really do much for me because I know, okay, well, everyone's getting that.
Please come back 20. Enter this at checkout.
Yeah, exactly. It's always something like that, right? And sometimes they try to make it random, and then you see it's not, and it makes it worse. Make a unique coupon code, because that way, as a customer, you do really feel like you're getting something that is time sensitive, that is exclusive, that is made for you and meant for you, and you're like, well, I need to use it. And I speak from a lot of personal experience when I give this advice, just as a customer. Yeah, when I get a coupon code and it's just for me and it's a product that I like, I'm more inclined to go to the website and use it, because I'm like, well, I'm going to buy from that website anyway at some point, so why not get $30 off if it's just today or it's just this week? And I know it's not like I can just look up that code in a week. Then I know I need to use it today, and I will.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Is that when you do these unique coupon codes, is it just a random combination of characters and numbers? Do you do something like first name just for you, 20% off, something like that? Does it even matter?
I think it does matter that it's unique. How unique it is doesn't matter as much. I think maybe it can be good, though, for your own, at least reporting purposes, to throw in a word in there that is useful, like come back, and then like prefix it, come back. And then that way you can then like segment. Yeah. And then it's got, I'd say like come back, and then it's random letters, right? But at that point, you are able to like look at all your coupons. You might have 100,000 if you send a lot of emails, but you could search and segment them, at least in Metorik and probably in WooCommerce admin, and just type in come back and then see all those coupons and monitor that. So it can help a lot to categorize it in that way. It's not essential, but I think it will help down the line. So I'd recommend it.
I can already tell you're always thinking about how to do something so that you can analyze it later on. Is that a habit that you've built over time?
I think so. I think it's always like, even just from support and kind of hearing from customers, and they'll say something like, oh, we want to look at all the coupons from this. And I'm like, well, you could do it this way, but next time it's going to be easier if you do this. But yeah, I definitely tend to see data in a different way now that I'm like in the thick of it every day for so long, almost like half a decade now.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's something that most e-commerce owners need to learn, but need to instill in themselves. I'm learning this myself with everything I do. I now use UTM tags when I do a call to action, so that I know exactly where the click is coming from, where the customer came from. Because with GDPR and CCPA and all the other laws that we have in place, you just cannot trust Google Analytics or Facebook tracking anymore. It just isn't reliable.
No, you're right. And a lot of these things, like these realizations like you've had and like most stores have, and that I've had, come from experience and come from sending out an email and then later asking those questions. Well, we had a great growth this month, but where did they come from? And then you're like, oh, well, I wish there was a way to track that. Oh, UTMs, and that's kind of how it works. But the important part isn't getting it right the first time, but it's like noticing that when it does become an issue and then trying to find a solution like those, because the solutions are out there. It can just take a little while to realize that it's a problem to begin with. But once you do, you're like, okay, what's the solution?
That is a perfect full circle that we've done right here, though, because you can only find the solutions if you have the data, if you have the reports at hand.
Exactly. I mean, and that's why I think it's such an important topic. It's not a hot topic. It's not like something that everyone thinks about straight away. Like, because when you're starting a business, your priority isn't always that, but it's also just like getting customers and getting actual revenue in. And then later you might look at the numbers, but at some point they become important. So the earlier you start like focusing on them and tracking them in the right way, you don't need to look at them straight away. Like I don't look at my metrics for Metorik, all the time. I'll sometimes revisit them every couple months. Like I look at my ad spend maybe every few weeks, not every day, because just can't do that. But I make sure that I've got these things in place. So when I do look at it, all the information, all the data points I need are there. So I'm not like spending that whole session that I've dedicated to reviewing the metrics, setting them up,
I've done that multiple times. I just said I usually will go like this. I'm reading a book. Somebody says you need to look at this, that, and the other thing. I've set myself an hour or 2 hours on a given day to look at those numbers, and then I would figure out, damn it, I don't have them.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do I get
that?
them?
And exactly, and then I'll do that next time. So if you get it set up early on, it definitely helps. There's numbers I wish I was tracking earlier on. Even stuff like, I don't even ask customers at the moment, why did you cancel? And that's a silly thing to do. We just give them a cancel button, which of course I want to make it as easy as possible to cancel, but it doesn't hurt the user experience to just kind of pop in a question there that's optional with a few options and just be like, why? And still, I've been running this business for almost 5 years and we've never asked that. I'm going to start doing it soon. It's on my list, but every day I don't have it is another day of like a customer cancels today. I don't know why.
Yeah,
exactly. So if you get it from the start, even if you don't look at those numbers all the time, the day that you're ready to look at them, it's waiting for you. And I wish I had that with that data, for example, but I don't. I'll set it up soon and I won't look at it straight away, but 6 months later, I'll look at it and I'll know, okay, I've got 6 months of data now. That'll give me some comfort.
Yeah, 100%. That is such an important lesson to learn. It's like, it's super easy to lose yourself in data. It's super easy to think about when you're starting at one report and then ideas come and you think about, hey, I could track this, I could track the other thing, and boom, the day is gone and you didn't do anything really productive that moved the business forward on that day. In 6 months it will, but on that day it didn't.
It's hard.
Yeah. Bryce, we've covered a ton of ground in this conversation. I really appreciate the openness also about your own learnings, about your own findings.
No, my pleasure.
That was really cool. So friends, if you're watching this, you can learn more about Metorik at metorik.com. Link is on the screen. It's in the description of the video. I would also love to point you to the agency partner program that Cloudways is hosting, cloudways.com/en/agency. If you're spending over $100 with us, apply for the partner program. You get a ton of goodies and you get better support and so on. So definitely check out that link. Bryce, thank you so much for taking the time for us. Where do people connect with you personally if they have further questions?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm not too active as a tweeter, but I will see your tweets if you tweet at me. Not many people do, so I definitely will stand up. And I'm pretty responsive, so it'd be cool to hear from everyone that's got questions or just wants to chat. But yeah, Twitter, I'm at Bryce Adams. Posted, I think you probably know, Jan. I'll post it in there for you. Yeah, that's my Twitter. I'm there. Tweet at me, send me a DM. We can chat. But yeah, I'm also just curious, like, did I miss anything? Is there any metrics that people think are, more important? Post in the comments. It'll be cool to read
definitely.
that and take that away for me just to improve as well. So I appreciate that.
I love it. And if you want to touch base with me, friends, go to virtualsummitmastery.com. Of course, one last pitch for the agency partner program. It is really, really good. We are really excited about this. Bryce, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join.